Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about the arbitrary complexity, especially on spells within Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and the deep, deep desire we need to get this game much, much simpler, specifically in Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition, or actually, much, much better, we really need Dungeons & Dragons Lite, and we need it now, okay? Alright, so I want to give you, this is a sad face story. If you're in a bad place and you're sad, I'm going to give it a trigger warning right now. Nothing good about Dungeons & Dragons is going to be said in the following video because I'm a little frustrated with a situation I'm having at my real table. Alright, so let me give you a play report. So, on some of the games I've been playing. So, one of the games, I ran a online game with Waterdeep Dragon Heist in 2020. We got through a third of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and the game completely blew apart and went off the rails because I had one player character. Actually, it fell apart for two reasons. I had one player character that absolutely insisted on making the other player characters in the group his enemy, right? And would call the city guard on them, and was always playing devil's advocate and choosing a different way than the rest of the group. There was never any harmony within the player group, and I actually killed this character once. Invited the character back, thinking the player back, thinking that he would learn the lesson of if you take this action. He called the city guard on the other player characters, and basically the denizens in this tavern just killed his player character. Right? I'm like, if you make the player characters your enemy, that's going to end very badly for you and your character. I invited him back because he was a long-time friend, and within 3 sessions, he did it again. Right? Had a major dispute with another player character, and tried to get other non-player characters to attack one of the player characters. Like, this is brutal, right? So, and at the same time, we had another player who had missed 2 sessions and then finally missed a third. Well, we only had 3 players in this thing. One of them is showing up very poorly, and one of them is dedicated to make the other player characters their enemy, right? I'm like, I'm calling it. We're done, right? So, as good a DM as I am, if you can't find the right players, sometimes campaigns end, right? Now, the one good thing is I always know the campaigns are not, and by the way, that entire Waterdeep run was the request of a friend, right? So, we shut it down, and we let 2 weeks, we let about 2 months simmer. And I was getting the itch to run again, and I'm like, I really need to run a good tabletop role-playing game for friends. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing any of this online nonsense. And so what we did was we took 2 people from my household and brought in a third. So we had 3 players again, right? And we were using a bubble technique. Like basically 2 of the people were from my own family. One person is coming in, they're local. And we all were like, if any of us are exposed, right, we'll inform the other before the week happens, right? And so we've been able to keep this going. We've been going for a while now. But one of the players I had was a junior high male, okay? And he came in and he was willing to play, right? But the reality is, once we started playing, I could tell that this Gen Z player, male player, really wasn't feeling the game, right? Now, this Gen Z player is primarily a video game player, and where we really landed was we realized to him Dungeons & Dragons seemed outrageously slow. And I get that. From a video game perspective, probably more happens in a tutorial than might happen in 6 hours of Dungeons & Dragons play. Traditional Dungeons & Dragons 5th hour play. And I'm like, wow. And so he just wasn't feeling it. He also chose to play a wizard. Oh boy, was that a problem, right? So basically, every single time it was his turn to cast a spell, he's like, I want to cast this spell. And I'm like, great. Do you need to roll, or does it just happen? Right? And he's like, what do you mean by that? Right? I'm like, look in there, see if you need to make a ranged attack, see if your opponent needs to make a roll, or some spells, it just happens. So he'd look at the book, and he'd spend 1.5 minutes in the book, maybe 2 minutes, and then somebody at the table would grab the book, right, the player's handbook, and tell him what to do. And this happened no less than 6 times within like 3 sessions, right? And I'm like, he can't cast spells, right? Like, it was frustrating him, and it was frustrating, all the other players at the table, but it was just arbitrarily complex. when he went to cast a spell, it was not clear if he rolled to see if the spell worked, if the opponent rolled to see if it worked, or if it just happened, right? And there were ranges and durations, and for somebody who grew up on video games, you hit the button, you see exactly what the range of the spell is, you see what the duration of the spell, it all happens instantly. This was just mesmerically slow for him. And he bowed out. He's like, I'm out. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. But it doesn't have to be this way, okay? I run Index Card RPG. Index Card RPG has solved every single problem we dealt with, right? Index Card RPG, every single spell fits on a single line. A single line, right? I had this other player reading 2-3 paragraphs of content after the 5 or 6, different spell attributes at the top. It was crazy, right? So Dungeons and Dragons is outrageously arbitrarily complex. We must reduce this complexity if we're going to win young players. How do we do that? Hashtag please Hasbro Gaming, reduce the complexity of spellcasting in Dungeons and Dragons current edition or in the next edition, or give us a Dungeons and Dragons Lite that is simple, intuitive, and fun. Because Dungeons and Dragons is fun. It is not intuitive, and it is not simple. And there's no reason in the world there shouldn't be a simple, fun, intuitive version of Dungeons and Dragons, rather than an abstract, complex, fun version, which is what we have now, right? Which is fun for people who are abstract and love complexity, which is definitely me, right? But I would really like to be able to play with people who don't love abstraction and don't love complexity. And the rest of the world really deserves a fun, simple version of Dungeons and Dragons. I wish we could get there, and I really hope that Hasbro Gaming can give it to us in 2021, right? All that's my opinion. What do you think? Do you think that the abstraction and complexity of Dungeons & Dragons is exactly where it should be? Or would you like to see some players come in who don't love abstraction and don't love complexity? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.